Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of What If Naruto Changed His Identity. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 6. Naruto age 11, 1 year after promotion. Naruto and his team were exploring a relatively unknown section of T Country. Due to a slight break in search and rescue missions, in which Naruto hadn't had any missions in almost a month, Konoha gave him an exploratory mission instead. A client wanted a Konoha team to explore a mountainous region of T Country for any unknown settlements, mineral samples, and any paths that could be found to get through Mountain Group. The mission had tried to be done by a civilian team earlier, only to run into problems due to the number of treacherous routes they had tried. Naruto was leading yet another group of whiny genin to accompany him. If there was one thing he now hated more than any other, it was a group of whiny genin. Why is a kid leading us? He could hear a shrieking voice in his head. I don't want to go that way, let's go this way, another annoying voice had said in his mind. He had heard them all and he was sick of it. Naruto was starting to go to bed hoping he would be awoken in the middle of the night, just so he could have an excuse to go on missions alone. Over the last year, Naruto had faithfully served in his position as the Chunin on call for search and rescue missions. He had been on dozens of missions and had led many genin safely to either the victims or the bodies of the victims. There was one thing that made it all worth it, however. One thing that made him willing to put up with the constant sameness of missions, the whiny genin, and the slow genin. That one thing was the Chunin section of the library. The Chunin section, unlike the genin section, contained incredibly more information. It seems that when librarians are deciding what section to place ninja information, the default is the Chunin section. If information is incredibly basic, it goes to the genin section. If information is classified high level or more dangerous, it goes to the jonin section. But, by default, everything originally goes to the Chunin section. Naruto had already been able to learn quite a few new skills, including a deeper understanding of all the skills he had previously studied. He maximized his training schedule when he was off duty, never knowing when a mission was about to come up and take him away. He also followed a previous idea of finding ways he could be training when he wasn't doing anything. On that subject, an area he had been concentrating on lately was elemental chakra control. The Chunin library contained dozens of ways to train elemental control, and many of them he could do when he was resting and waiting for genin to recover from traveling speed. He had bought a piece of chakra paper from a ninja store to find out his primary element, and surprise, it was fire. He supposed that was expected, seeing as how this was fire country. Either way, he had already completed every fire control exercise in the Chunin library and was trying to invent new ones to increase his already strong affinity. He also had copies of the control exercises for other elements, hoping to at least be able to use them as efficiently as he could, even if they weren't as easy as fire. Tsukumo-san, I found what looks like a pass to the other side of the mountain. One of the genin interrupted his train of thought. Naruto looked at the genin. Shin-san was one of the genin he had worked with before and was once annoying as the others. But, since he had done missions with him before, he at least understood that Naruto was a Chunin and this was not some joke. Let's wait for the others, then we'll check it out together. Naruto told the older genin. His team was currently in the center of the mountain cluster. There were no hidden settlements inside, like the client had suspected, and they had already collected mineral samples. The previous team had done an acceptable job of looking for ways into the cluster looking on the east side, but they had missed a cave that seemed to go through almost the entire mountain. A fortunate find his team had made when looking for a place to set up camp. Now that they were inside, a search for exits should be easier than looking for entrances. 15 minutes later, his team had assembled in the meeting spot to review their findings. Indeed, Shin was the only one who found a passable route, as the others were either blocked or too treacherous. 5 minutes later, they were on their way to test out this route. The passage he had found was a bit steep at a few moments, but with a little work, a civilian crew should make it passable. Naruto took all this down on his sketch of the area and made sure to leave ribbons tied to significant trees or rocks in order to highlight the path to any others who would be following. Alright, Let's head back to Kawamoto to report our findings. Naruto announced to his team. Naruto prepared himself for the trip of running at low genin speed for an hour, waiting half an hour for them to recover while training his earth chakra control, before trying to run again for an hour. -6. Now that Naruto was back in Konoha, he was ready to begin a plan that he had been considering for the last few months. During his last extended break during missions, he had spent considerable time in the library. While he was there, he came across a section of a book detailing the different types of clone jutsus and their advantages for each type of situation. That is where he came upon it, Kage Bunshin, the Shadow Clone. The book didn't have the instructions for how to do it, but they did include the advantages: a solid clone, made of chakra, and memory transfer. Memory transfer. With this, his training could skyrocket and his missions would be even easier. The only problem, it was a forbidden jutsu restricted to Jonin. However, Naruto hoped that he could apply for an exception to the rule. If he could prove that he was capable of using the jutsu effectively, despite the high chakra cost, it would greatly increase the efficacy of his mission. For him to be able to split into even 2 copies would double the area he could cover while proving to clients that he was the right person for the job. Naruto had made the request to the Jonin commander, Shikaku Nara, before he had left for this last mission, and he hoped that now he was back he would receive a response. Indeed, upon returning to the mission office to report his mission success, he found they had a note to stop by his office the next time he was in. Naruto hurried over to Shikaku's office to plead his case. -6. Shikaku heard a knock on his door when his secretary entered, telling him that Tsukumo Hayashi was here to see him. Ah yes, his request from a few days ago. Come in, Tsukumo-san. Nara-sama. Tsukumo greeted respectfully. How did your last mission go? Shikaku said, making small talk as he sat down again. Pretty well. We were hired to find a path through a treacherous mountain cluster, and we stumbled onto a cave that was able to take us inside. Once there, we had an easier time finding a way out of the other side, due to the fact that the inside was a smaller search area. We also collected samples and reported back. Naruto replied, taking a seat across from the commander. Good, good. As to your request, your reasons for wanting to learn the Shadow Clone are well stated, but I think you may be underestimating the high chakra cost of the jutsu, however. The Jonin commander said. Naruto nodded, expecting this. I did see that part and understand that chakra will be split evenly among my clones, thereby draining me much more quickly, but I've come to understand that my chakra reserves are quite big for a Chunin and very big for my age. I have trained even more extensively in chakra control exercises now that I have access to that wonderful Chunin library. Naruto said that last part with a wide grin, making sure Nara-sama understood how happy he was to have access to it. Even if I can only make 1 copy, I think it would still be a good investment. Especially with the sort of missions I take. Shikaku considered his request. Tsukumo-san did have a good mission record and was adjusting to life as a Chunin fairly well. It wasn't completely rare for a ninja to have access to at least one jutsu that was a little higher than them. Alright, I'll give you a shot. Please take notice, however, that this is a secret jutsu to Konoha and not to reveal how to perform it to anyone else. Shikaku wrote his authority down on a piece of paper and stamped it with a stamp from one of his drawers. Take this to Training Ground 7 and give it to the masked man hanging around there. He will be the one to teach you this jutsu. Masked man. Naruto said. Yes, he wears a mask just like yours. His name is Kakashi Hatake and frequently spends his free time hanging around the memorial stone. Shikaku replied. Naruto thought for a moment, recalling an earlier experience. Does he wear a Konoha Hitai over one of his eyes? Yes, that's him. How did you know? Shikaku asked. I ran into him once when I was learning how to do my first fire jutsu. He helped me out. Naruto recalled, fondly remembering the days when he only had the lousy genin library to learn from. -6. Naruto approached Training Ground 7 to look for the Jonin to get started on learning what he hoped would be his new favorite jutsu. He spotted the man standing in front of the memorial stone and experienced a moment of deja vu. This was exactly the same way he had been standing almost 2 years ago, and the Jonin commander knew right where to find him. Naruto briefly stopped to consider what that meant for the Jonin. Actually, it wasn't hard to consider. This Jonin had clearly lost either someone or many someones on missions. Naruto felt like he was intruding going up to him to ask him for his help once again. The Jonin became aware of his presence however. Are you here for the stone? Naruto was jerked out of his line of thought. No. Hatake-san. I don't know if you remember me, but you once helped me over there when I was first learning how to perform fire jutsus. Naruto pointed over to the calm lake. Kakashi looked at him briefly before he remembered the incident he was referring to. Oh. Hey, a Chunin already. Since you know my name, I guess you're here for something. Naruto nodded before pulling out the paper the Jonin commander had given him. He handed the paper over to Kakashi and said, I applied to learn a forbidden jutsu and Nara-sama approved. He said you could teach me. I was surprised when he described you that I had met you before. Kakashi glanced over the paper with his good eye and looked for any sign of forgery. Well, Tsukumo-san, shall we get started? Kakashi said as he looked over the paper again to find this kid's name. Kakashi then instructed him on the hand seals, the chakra requirements, and the usage of the jutsu. He was quite surprised when Naruto, who had prepared for this by learning the Earth Clone Jutsu, had learned the jutsu within a few minutes. Naruto successfully made 3 clones with ease as he wondered what it would have been like if he had access to this jutsu instead of all the time he had spent learning the first one. Well, if I hadn't learned the first one, my chakra control would probably still be terrible now. -6. A few days later, Naruto was walking to a training ground to try out an earth jutsu he had found in the Chunin library. He was almost to one of his favorite training spots when he heard some barking from a nearby training ground. Wait a minute, I know those barks, Naruto thought as he made a quick detour. Like he suspected, Hana and her dog Trio were in the area. Hana, Naruto yelled to his old friend. Immediately her head rose to see him and the Heimaru triplets ran over to greet him. Naruto spent the next few minutes petting and greeting the dogs, who seemed especially hyperactive today. Hana stood up from where she was sitting and walked over to meet him. Hey Tsukumo, here for some training. How are the missions going? Naruto continued petting the dogs as he replied, yep, trying to learn a new ninjutsu from the library. Missions are going well, I'm sure you can imagine. Hana grinned. Yeah, looks like you're starting to get a little sick of them, huh? Naruto smirked ruefully. It's the genin I'm getting sick of. At least you were closer to them in age. Every mission I get, all I hear is, why should we listen to you, you're just a kid. I swear, I'm starting to look for excuses to go on missions alone. Naruto imitated the voices he had been hearing in the most irritating way he could. Hana shook her head as she sympathized for him. Well, I had a few older genin do that to me, but not that bad. Yeah well, I know what I signed up for. I just thought they would get over it after a few months. Anyway, how are you? What's up with the Heimaru? They seem more hyperactive than I've ever seen them. Naruto decided to ask when one of the dogs tried to jump on his shoulders. Hana sighed. It's my medical nin training. At this point it's mostly studying books and shadowing medical nin in the hospital, so I don't have much time for them. Even today, I still have to study most of the time. Hana held up a book to show that she was reading more than training. Man, wish I could help you, but all I know is what they taught me in the week-long training program that genin can take. Naruto truly wished he could help her. Hana had taught him a lot and he felt like he owed her. Hana smiled. Don't worry about it, this is what I signed up for. Besides, it looks like you have other things to worry about. What do you mean? Hana pointed behind him to an administrative genin that was approaching them. Somehow, she knew that he wasn't here for her. Hayashi-san, a search and rescue mission has just come in. Here are the details. He handed Naruto a scroll and left to return to the administrative building. Naruto sighed before opening up the scroll to see a standard search and rescue mission for an expedition that had not reported in for a month. Standard mission to find a group they have already written off as dead, Naruto thought. Urgent? Hana asked. No, looks like just a routine search for an expedition they've already written off. Naruto replied to his predecessor. Hana nodded before looking at her dogs. Hey Tsukumo, can I ask you a favor? Naruto, happy to help, nodded and said, "Sure, what do you need? Why don't you take the Heimaru brothers with you on this mission?" Hana said, looking at her dogs. The three dogs, completely capable of understanding what was being said, perked up at this request. Naruto's eyes widened. "Are you sure? Have you ever been apart from them for more than a day?" Hana nodded. "Like I said, I've been studying a lot lately. They've been really hyperactive because of that. In fact, they haven't been on a real mission in almost 6 months." Naruto nodded, understanding her reasoning. "Alright, I can do that. What do you say, guys? Feel like having a boys only week?" Naruto asked the pups. All three barked enthusiastically, happy to be doing something. "Alright, can I seal up some dog food to take with me at your compound before I leave?" Naruto asked, remembering what it was like back in the good old days of search and rescue. "Sure, let's go pick it up now," Hana said. -6 months later. Naruto thought back to the mission he had performed with the Heimaru triplets. It had indeed been a routine mission, but unlike the others, he had decided not to take any genin, since he had backup in the form of Inuzuka dogs. They had a nice run to where the expedition was reported to be, and the dogs seemed to enjoy the challenge of sniffing out a month-old trail from an unknown group of humans. They had picked up the trail of a few bandit groups before finding the bodies of the expedition. The fact that the bodies had been stripped of all valuables and had sword wounds still visible pointed at one of the bandit groups as being responsible. The dogs were able to determine which group had been responsible, and Naruto had been able to recover an expedition log after dealing with the bandits. At that point, Naruto and his companions for the trip decided to take the long way back to Konoha. That trip had been a relaxing experience for Naruto and reminded him of the old days, when it was just him, Hana, and the dogs. But, like all things, it came to an end and he was back to running missions with whiny Genin. This time, he had received a mission at noon while he had been sitting down for lunch. This of course meant that he would be walking into a mission office full of Genin looking to get on a mission, so he could at least have his choice of subordinates. When he walked into the room, he noted that there was a Jonin-led Genin team standing in the front. When Naruto announced to the room that he was looking for Genin to accompany him on a search and rescue C rank, the Jonin immediately asked to speak with him. The Jonin revealed that he would be going on an A-rank mission that called for his skills, and he wanted his Genin team to go on a mission during his absence. Naruto handed the Jonin the mission scroll and asked if his Genin had any experience with bandits, a likely scenario with his missions. The Jonin looked over the request and replied that his students had experienced a few bandit eradication missions in the past, so they would not fall apart when confronted with them. The nice thing about this was that the Jonin was able to order his Genin to follow the orders of Tsukumo for the duration of the mission, which meant they would not be conflicted on whether to obey someone younger than them. This sort of mission was his bread and butter: locate an expedition extracting mineral samples near the border of river country that had gone missing a week and a half ago. Naruto and his Genin team were almost at the last known location. Tsukumo Taicho. What do we do when we reach the last known location? Kaori, a member of the Genin team, asked. We won't know precisely what to do until we see it, but locating their last known campsite and tracking their movement will hopefully lead us to them. Usually if that doesn't work, scouting out the locale bandits and villages in the area will give us clues on who has seen them last. Naruto lectured. Mostly, I'm looking for a recent scent that belongs to one of them so I can track them. Are you an Inuzuka? I thought they were the only ones who could track by scent. Taro questioned. The Aburame can track by scent as well. Eiji, a stoic Aburame himself, replied to his teammate. Anyone who is trained to can track by scent. It requires you to channel chakra to the nose in a precise way. I was trained by an Inuzuka, so I was able to learn how. But it is true that the Inuzuka are experts better than I will likely ever be. Naruto answered patiently, glad that these Genin were at least showing some respect. They arrived at a clearing that had been used as a campsite a while back. Here, Naruto was able to pick up on a few distinct scents, including one who belonged to a woman who used a distinctive perfume. Naruto then gathered his Genin and led them along the trail to where the scents led. 2 days later, they came upon the bodies of the members of the expedition. Kaori, whom Naruto presumptuously identified as a fangirl, refused to touch the bodies. Naruto and the Aburame were the only ones to sort through their belongings to pick up their mineral samples and journals. Naruto, who had already become adept at recognizing different samples, immediately began to see problems with what he was seeing. First of all, it was the wrong location for bandits, as they were nowhere near a major or even minor trail. Second, the mineral samples they were carrying were all useless rocks that were of no mining interest. When mineral samples were taken, the expeditions knew that they would be carrying them for the next few months, so they didn't take anything unless they were hopeful it would contain ores that could be commercially mined. Finally, when Naruto read the last few pages of the journal, the information within didn't seem to match the local terrain. Naruto relayed his suspicions to his team. They were dubious of his conclusions, but still seemed willing to follow his orders when he decided to track the bandit group to find out why they attacked the expedition. They tracked the group for another 2 days before coming across a large bandit group operating near one of the major road. Naruto had come across many bandits, but he had never engaged a group this big. He could tell that his team was excited, but he was nervous. He couldn't fathom why a group this big had wandered all the way into the wilderness in order to pursue one little expedition group. -6. Isamu Ito walked into his team's usual training ground, glad to see his team had made it back safely from their mission. He would brief them on their mission, verify with the young Chunin, and decide actions to take then. So, how did your search and rescue C rank go? Great. Taro replied. Fine. Kaori said. Quote. Ag. Tell me how the mission went. Isamu said. The three looked at one another before Kaori started. Well, it started out like a lot of the other missions. We went to where the missing people were last seen, found their campsite, and the Chunin followed their scents to their bodies. I thought that would be it, but he said there was something wrong with the scene. Wrong with the scene? Isamu asked, confused by what he thought would be a simple mission. Ag took over. The location of the bodies wasn't near any major or minor roads, yet it appeared that bandits killed them. The last entries in the journal didn't match the terrain, and according to the Chunin, the mineral samples were the wrong type that they should be carrying. As expected of an Aburame, this had been said in monotone and was precise and to the point. Taro decided to take over from here. The Chunin followed the scents of the bandits, and a couple days later we found a huge group of bandits, over 100. Over 100. Tell me you didn't try to assault that group. Isamu thought worriedly. I thought we were going to, but the Chunin wouldn't let us. Taro said, disappointed. The Jonin took a sigh of relief. Instead, he used Genjutsu to scout out the camp and discovered that the scents didn't actually belong to any of the bandits. Ag said in a monotone voice. Who did the scents end up belonging to? The Jonin couldn't take it anymore and wanted to skip ahead. Kaori jumped in and continued. Turns out they were mercenaries. They were hired by a river country mining company to make it seem like there was nothing of value in the area. We were able to catch up with them a day later. They were trying to throw any pursuers off balance by paying that bandit group to set up camp in their old campsite. How did you find that out? The Jonin asked his team. We caught up with the mercenaries a day later. There were only a few of them, and after we killed half of them, the Chunin did some sort of prisoner's dilemma on the remaining two in order to find out who hired them. Then we returned home. Taro concluded. Isamu decided to give them the rest of the day off and have a conversation with the Chunin sooner rather than later. -6. Naruto had met with the Jonin commander and was expecting a meeting with the Team Jonin any day now. This was an unusual mission for him, and it was not often that he broke from routine. He had been assured by Shikaku-sama that he had done everything correctly and had been congratulated both in his insight into the ruse and his restraint when it came to the large bandit group. Konoha would be alerting the mining company to the ruse and using it to secure future contracts for Konoha Ninja. Tsukumo-san. Naruto looked up to see the Jonin of the Genin team approaching him. Naruto waved his hand lazily to show him where he was, even though the Jonin had already spotted him. As the Jonin made the last few steps, Naruto decided to start. Sorry, you were probably hoping for a quiet mission to send your team on. All I can say is that was an anomaly from my usual missions. The Jonin shook his head. I should be thanking you. When I heard the size of that bandit group, I was scared for a minute that you engaged them, but I'm glad you didn't. Naruto shook his head. Even if they were the guilty party, I wouldn't engage them with a genin team I wasn't familiar with. The Jonin nodded. Well, thanks anyway. Anything I should know about their performance? They were pretty good. The Aburame was pretty professional, the others didn't want to search the dead bodies. But they were able to obey the chain of command, which is the biggest problem I usually run into. Give them my thanks for knowing when to obey orders and walk away from a fight. Will do. The Jonin responded. -6. Naruto was once again hanging out at the Inuzuka compound. Being here served two separate purposes. First, it let him hang out with his one true friend, Hana. He was able to play with her dogs and get them out of her hair for a while or just talk with someone who had been where he was. Second purpose, or rather his ulterior purpose, was to scout anyone that might be open to taking over his position for him. He had been in charge of search and rescue missions for a year and a half now and was getting sick of it. If there was anyone capable of doing this kind of work with little training, it was an Inuzuka, so he was keeping his eyes and ears open for anyone that may want it. He was currently talking with Hana and her mother Sume on what he might want to do when he was relieved of search and rescue. He knew that while he wouldn't mind learning more about the human body for some of his long-term projects, he wouldn't be interested in becoming a fully trained medic nin. Aside from this, they had discussed other avenues he could take now that he had Chunin rank and eventual freedom from his current duty. They had discussed village security, intelligence, teaching, and many others. They had even discussed how one might let Anbu know that he would be open to the possibility of joining them, as their organization was usually by invite only. But none of those fields really felt like the right decision for now. What sort of missions do you want to end up doing? Hana asked. I'm not sure. I really didn't do that much of variety before you roped me into this search and rescue stuff. Naruto said back, teasing her by making it seem like she trapped him into this a bit. Maybe you should try for one of the boiler teams. Sume eventually suggested. Both Hana and Naruto looked at her wondering what she was talking about. After seeing their faces, Sume decided to continue. A boiler team, or B team, as they are both nicknamed, are teams that stay together for years at a time and take B-rank missions one after another. They are usually made up of Chunin and Tokubetsu Jonin teams of 4. They are nicknamed Boiler because it both starts with B and because they take lots of different missions, like you would describe someone who works hard in a boiler room. Naruto considered what she had said and decided to look into it. It sounded promising anyway. -6. After researching what Sume had said, Naruto felt that a boiler team may be a promising choice. They seemed to be made up primarily of Chunin in their mid to late teens and Jonin in their early 20s. They were actually the ones who probably earned Konoha a large bulk of their money. Most of the money given on D ranks went straight to the genin and Konoha only took a small portion of C rank pay, as that is what most career genin made for a living. B and A ranks on the other hand, Konoha took a larger portion of the profit for the services of the village. They seemed like a group of teams that worked hard and gave a lot of experience, but the potential for burnout was high. Of course, before pursuing this, he had to know what openings were available and he had to get a replacement for search and rescue. Chapter 7. Naruto age 12. Thanks to the help of Hana and Sume, he was able to find a successor to continue on with his search and rescue missions. It wasn't pretty, but a Chunin Inuzuka who had lost half of his hand in a mission gone wrong last year, had agreed to take his place. Ordinarily, when someone received an injury this bad, their career would be over. However, since search and rescue missions were generally low risk, carried out with genin support, and the Inuzuka had a dog to support him, they were able to get an exemption. The Chunin Inuzuka was happy to still be useful when he feared his ninja life would be completely over, and Naruto was able to move on to bigger and brighter things. Naruto was technically on leave right now, to determine where he wanted to go in his career. He had been looking into the boiler teams and was tentatively looking to accept a posting there. However, there was one thing he was conflicted about doing first, meeting with the Hokage. Naruto had agreed to come back to Konoha to be a ninja by the time he was of age. The Sandaime didn't know he had already fulfilled this promise, but Naruto still felt he should make direct contact. He had been sending letters every few months when he was on a mission near a major city, but knew the Hokage had no way of writing him back. Eventually, Naruto decided to send him a letter requesting a meeting with him in his old apartment. Naruto would forego the face mask and dye his hair back blonde, but try to limit the information that he gave the Hokage. -7. The Sandaime pondered his situation once more as he arrived at Naruto's apartment building. For the last few years he had been worried sick over whether or not Naruto was even alive or dead. 5 times, he had come close to ordering a team be sent to look for him, and he didn't know how many times he pondered letting Jiraiya try to find him. He had only received some cryptic letters from him every few months to let him know he was doing okay. He would be very relieved to see him in person. As he arrived at Naruto's door, he paused for a moment to collect himself before letting himself in. As expected, there was Naruto. "Naruto, my boy, it is good to see you after so long." It truly was. Naruto had grown quite a bit and looked both strong and confident. His hair was a bit shorter and his clothes were more acceptable for everyday wear. "Hey," was all he said as he went over to give the Sandaime a hug. So, the Sandaime started, as he had a seat in one of the chairs. "What have you been up to the past few years? Where have you traveled?" "Well, that's a bit of a story. One I think you're going to be pretty surprised with," Naruto said with a smirk. "I think you should know, however, that it was a tough call on whether or not I should meet with you." The Sandaime frowned. He knew that there was the potential that Naruto would not want to return to Konoha after experiencing life without the pressures of being a Jinchuriki, but he didn't think that Naruto would betray a promise. Naruto decided to interrupt any response he might have had, however. "I will begin by saying that I will tell you a little of what I've been up to, and I think that you will be pretty proud of me. If you give me an order to answer your questions as the Hokage, I won't refuse or lie. But if you ask me a question as a friend, I may refuse to answer, but I also won't lie." The Sandaime considered this. Why would Naruto be saying something like that? He supposed that if he wanted to, he could order Naruto to tell him everything, but it would be the Hokage ordering it, not his friend. For now, he would let Naruto tell him what he could and reserve that power for later. "Go ahead, Naruto." "Well, I suppose that the first thing I did was head up to the Fire Country capital to legally change my name," Naruto began. "I then traveled a bit, but within 3 months, I was back in Konoha." Back in Konoha. It was not often that the Sandaime was surprised. The whole reason for Naruto leaving was to get away from Konoha. Why did he come back? The Sandaime thought. "Yep," Naruto said with that infernal smirk on his face. "I reapplied for the Ninja Academy under my assumed name." Reapplied for the academy. And they didn't recognize him. The Sandaime wondered how his academy teachers could be so stupid as to not recognize Uzumaki Naruto, whom they had spent almost a year complaining about. The Sandaime could see Naruto was still smirking, but was still trying to process this information. "This is the point where I don't know what information to give you," Naruto eventually continued. "I like the life I'm leading right now. I know that if I continue along this course I will eventually reach a point where if I take off my mask, there would eventually be a lot of people that would respect me for what I have accomplished and what I could accomplish in the future. I don't want to go back to being Uzumaki Naruto quite yet." "Wait, accomplished? Are you in the academy right now or are you a ninja right now?" The Sandaime could see that Naruto was conflicted about whether or not he should answer the question. I'm a ninja. Which is another reason I can't refuse a direct order from you," Naruto eventually said. The Sandaime considered this. Naruto was already a ninja, going on missions and learning from Jonin about how to be a ninja. He was very concerned that he didn't know about this, but in the end, decided that it was better for Naruto to be learning how to be a random ninja of Konoha than to be wandering around Fire Country by himself. "Now we reach the impasse," Naruto said. "I can't give you any other information, or I would essentially be telling you who I am, but I do want you to know that I'm safe and keeping my promise to become a Konoha ninja." "Why don't you want me to know who you are?" the Sandaime asked, already suspecting the reasons, but wanted to hear them from Naruto's mouth. Naruto thought about it for a moment. "I guess the biggest reason is that I want to see what I can accomplish when I'm completely on my own. The second you look up my file, your assistants, your guards, Anyone watching your activities is going to wonder why you're looking me up for no reason. If you try to keep an eye on me, the same thing will happen. Like the quote says, the act of observation changes behavior the observed. I still want to see what I can do on my own. The Sandaime considered what Naruto had said. He greatly wanted to know who he was and what he had done while within the ninja ranks, but Naruto was right. Anything the Sandaime did, short of asking Naruto, would alert others, especially Danzo. If there was one person the Sandaime wanted Naruto to avoid, it was Danzo. Alright, I won't order you to answer me. But I do have separate orders for you. First, you will write your new name and ninja ID number on a piece of paper and put it under the dresser. If I don't hear from you for a while, I will look there to determine how to reach you. The Sandaime waited for Naruto to nod in confirmation. Second, you will continue to send me letters confirming that you are doing okay. Lastly, and most importantly, you will not associate with Shimura Danzo. If fact, I order you to answer honestly, have you met or are you associated with Shimura Danzo? Naruto shook his head and said, no. Avoid him Naruto, he is dangerous. The Sandaime warned. With that, I will say that you were right. I am proud of you. -7. A few weeks later, Naruto had secured an interview one of the boiler teams. In fact, from the research he had done, this would be the team he was best suited for. This team, officially named B Rank Team 3, or code-named Brutal, was a group specializing in taijutsu and close-range combat. If the other members of the team were close-range specialists, then Naruto could fill the holes in what they were missing and they could teach him to become a better taijutsu user. If there was a skill that Naruto had that he wasn't confident with, it was taijutsu. Most of his experience with taijutsu was from sparring with Hana when he had the chance. Naruto was walking into the training ground where Team Brutal was currently sparring. As Naruto approached, he could tell that this was a team that took taijutsu seriously. If he succeeded in getting onto this team, his first few months would likely be very hard on his body. The team noticed his approach and stopped training. The oldest, who appeared to be their leader, said, "Do you have a message for us?" Naruto blinked for a minute, but got right to the heart of the matter. Actually, I'm here for an interview with your team. My name is Tsukumo Hayashi. The team looked at him oddly. Naruto suspected they were either doubting him or having second thoughts about agreeing to interview him. No doubt both stemmed from his age. Well, we didn't expect you to be so, the leader began. Young, Naruto said in a slightly patronizing way. What he means, a Chunin to his left interrupted, is we don't take rookie Chunin. This is a team that takes higher rank missions and we need someone more experienced. I've been a Chunin for 2 years. Naruto replied, making sure they understood that he wasn't a rookie. The team looked at one another, unsure of what to say to that. Naruto decided to give them a little relief. Why don't you just give me an interview like you would any other, test me like you would any other, and decide like you would any other? If you promise to give me the same chance you would anyone else with my experience, I promise I won't make a fuss about it later if you refuse. The leader nodded his head at such a fair offer. Truthfully, he was concerned that someone so young must be politically connected and therefore would create trouble if they didn't want him. Alright, sounds fair. My name is Rado Namiyashi, Tokubetsu Jonin, and the leader of this squad. To my left is Izumo Kamizuki, Chunin, and to my right is Katetsu Hagane, also Chunin. Naruto nodded at each of them, memorizing their names. Rado seemed to be a confident Jonin dressed in standard garb. He had brown spiky hair and had a scar on the left cheek of his face. Izumo was slightly short for his age, which appeared to be late teens, also had brown hair although it was covered by a bandana. Katetsu had spiky black hair, a soul patch on his chin, and a single white strip of cloth horizontally covering his face crossing his nose, for some reason. Alright, let's get started then. Rado began. What have you been doing for the last 2 years? I've been the Chunin on call for search and rescue missions. I've led almost constant genin teams to search for missing expeditions, semi-important people, and sometimes exploration missions. Naruto said as professionally as possible. Is that how you were promoted? Izumo asked. Yes, Hana Inuzuka, my predecessor recommended me after recognizing me as a potential successor. I asked that she train me to be good enough in tracking and help get my other skills up to Chunin level before the promotion was finalized though. Naruto defended. Do you think you were ready for the promotion? Katetsu asked. Naruto looked at him, wondering if that was a slight against his age, but decided to answer as honestly as he could. As ready as I could be for this particular promotion. At that point, I knew what missions I would be taking as I had already been on several of them as a genin. What makes you think that you are ready to be on a team like this? I assume you know what sort of missions we take. Rado took back over the questioning. I have done my research, or at least as much research I could without experiencing it for myself. To answer your question, I don't know if I'm fully ready, but I am looking for a change in my current career path. For the last 2 years I've mostly been doing the same thing, leading genin on C-rank missions and training in my off time. I'm interviewing with you because I feel this would be the best boiler team for me to join. Naruto concluded, hoping to steer the conversation toward a better direction. Why our team? Katetsu blurted out. Naruto internally smiled. I've heard that your team specializes in close-range combat. And that's your strongest skill? Azumo asked doubtfully, analyzing his body. Because taijutsu is my biggest weakness at the moment. Naruto revealed, to the shock of the team. Then why would you? Katetsu began. Because I'm hoping that for however long I'm here, you guys can help me build up my skills. Naruto interrupted. At the moment, I specialize in genjutsu and ninjutsu when it come to combat, while my taijutsu is probably only barely chunin level. I figured that I could cover some of the holes you might have in your team when it comes to ninjutsu and genjutsu while you taught me better taijutsu over time. What elements can you use? Rado asked. Fire is my primary and earth is my secondary element. However, I have mastered many of the basic elemental control exercises for all 5 elements, so I am comfortable using all of them, to a degree. Naruto said proudly. All of them? Azumo exclaimed. He himself had only started to learn water elemental control exercises, and that was his primary element. What is your ninjutsu arsenal like? Naruto considered this question. I know almost 100 jutsus, pretty much everything they had listed in the Chunin library. Rado smirked. You use the Chunin library often then? Of course. Naruto said proudly. It's probably the greatest thing that happened to me since I became a Chunin. If it weren't for that, I would have gotten so fed up with being a Chunin that I would have requested being demoted. What's wrong with being a Chunin? Katetsu asked, confused by this side of him. Well, you guys have probably noticed that I'm younger than a lot of the other Chunin. Naruto remarked as the others displayed a no duh expression. The genin that I was supposed to be supervising all the time just couldn't seem to accept it. Every mission, I worked with older genin who couldn't believe they were stuck in the reserve corps being commanded by someone younger than them. Every single mission it was, you're just a kid, or, why should I listen to you? It's enough to make a guy go crazy, I'll tell you. What did you do in situations like that? Rado asked, curious about what sort of leader he was. Usually those comments started at the beginning of the mission and in search and rescue you have to race to the last known site. So I made them prove they were better than me by trying to race non-stop to the site. When they started to drop like flies after only an hour and I was still pretty fresh, I made them understand that I was stronger than them and wasn't afraid to prove it. A couple of times I had to threaten insubordination, but I usually tried to keep my temper. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to, if you accept me. What's that? Rado asked. Being a subordinate again. Naruto replied. I realized that I had a much better time as a subordinate to an older commander than being a younger commander to an older subordinate. Well, how about a demonstration of skills then? Rado said, determining that the spoken interview had gone on long enough. Azumo, why don't you spar with Tsukumo? Rules. Naruto asked. Rado thought about it. For now, just taijutsu. Let's see your base level skill. After sparring with Azumo for a few minutes, the others could see that Naruto's taijutsu skill was pretty basic. In fact, he was still using the academy style as his primary style. Enough. Tsukumo, you may use any other skill to impress us, but nothing too destructive. Azumo, focus primarily on taijutsu. Rado said. He was disappointed with Tsukumo's taijutsu, but at least he was honest about it. Naruto, who knew he had just embarrassed himself with such a poor showing, decided to see if he could fool them using his genjutsu-enhanced fighting style. Naruto had come a long way since the days when he had developed this fighting against Hana. Let's see how well it worked on Azumo. -7. Azumo could feel the fight starting to change. Tsukumo had been right about his taijutsu needing serious work before, but now he couldn't figure out what had changed. It was like he suddenly changed from a novice to a master. Azumo felt like he was fighting against Guy, the strikes were coming out of nowhere. He was starting to have to use more and more power and speed just to keep up. Every time he struck, Tsukumo seemed to move out of the way at the last second. What was going on? -7. From a distance, Rado and Kotetsu were asking themselves the same question. Tsukumo had suddenly transformed into an expert fighter. They could still tell from his stance that he was using the same style, but for some reason he wasn't taking hits and he seemed to deliver them with pinpoint accuracy. After a recent miss from a much faster and harder kick from Azumo, Rado saw something out of the corner of his eye. Tsukumo had literally blurred there for a second. It wasn't speed, it was something else. He could tell at this point that Azumo was fighting with all he had, so there must be some sort of trick that Tsukumo was employing. There, he saw it again. Could it be that simple? -7. Stop. Rado said from the sidelines. Naruto and Azumo both ceased their attacks against the other. Azumo appeared to be slightly out of breath. How did you do that? Azumo said, confused. He looked to his friend, but Kotetsu appeared to be just as confused as him. Rado looked suspiciously at Naruto before speaking. Tsukumo, is it possible that what you were doing, was it genjutsu? Naruto seemed to smirk at the thought before nodding his head. But how? Azumo and Kotetsu both said. Azumo continued, I didn't see anything that could be a genjutsu. I would have known if I was placed under one. Rado motioned for Naruto to speak. Naruto smirked a little more before explaining. It wasn't a single genjutsu. It was multiple short and slight genjutsus. Nothing to make it seem out of ordinary, but enough to make you misjudge the distance between us, enough to make you see an opening, or a punch that doesn't exist. But you didn't use any hand seals. Azumo continued, unable to believe he had been fooled in such a way. Genjutsu is a field that relies heavily on imagination and chakra control. There aren't that many jutsus, as much as there are strategies. For me, over time I have learned to do simple genjutsus though pure chakra manipulation. It's difficult to keep up and use for extended fights like this, so I mostly use it to create openings for a kunai strike or something similar. Naruto explained. Azumo paled at this, he left a lot of openings. It would have been very easy for Naruto to have simply stabbed him with a kunai. Well, Rado began, still a little shocked himself. We will discuss this and contact you with our decision. Thank you for the opportunity. Naruto bowed. -7. The very next day, Naruto received a formal invitation to join the boiler team he had interviewed with. Apparently, he had made a good impression and their discussion hadn't taken long. He thought over his options on what he could be doing now before he accepted, but in the end, couldn't think of anything else. So, with no further thinking, he decided to accept their invitation. Naruto sent a clone over to the training spot he had interviewed in, to see if they were there. As expected, the team was training there, just as they had been yesterday. Naruto quickly dressed himself in some of his older mission clothes, which he had now designated training clothes, due to the state they were currently in. He was out the door and ready to surprise them for a day of training. When he showed up, the three were pretty surprised to see him. Naruto quickly explained that he was accepting the position they offered and would have the paperwork completed by tonight. He then asked if they wanted him to train with them now. The team seemed amused by his impetuousness and eagerness, but decided to include him anyway. They made a slight adjustment in their training and decided to review their team formations, introducing Naruto to the common travel, battle, investigatory, and formal formations that the team usually took and what keywords or hand signals were signs to take a formation. This wasn't quite the training Naruto was expecting, but knew that it would be somewhat important for the future. Teamwork was an important part of Konoha's fighting strategies, and it was something that Naruto had not experienced, as he had never really had a permanent team. It was a bit boring, but he kept that to himself and did his best to learn the formations and their signals. After all, he remembered how much whiny subordinates grated his nerves, and he never wanted to be that kind of subordinate. -7. Due to the fact that the team had taken on a new member, they were offered a brief reprieve from missions. Once Naruto had turned in his paperwork the next day and had gotten official orders for the unification of the team, Rado began his training in earnest. The break from missions would not last forever. In fact, they were given only 2 weeks for training him before it would be back to constant missions. Rado had hashed out Naruto's official training schedule in order to acclimate him to the new team as fast as possible. Within a couple of weeks, they could literally have each other's lives in their hands, so there was no time to waste. As this was an existing team, they had a number of internal regulations that only applied to their team. Things like where to store weapons and equipment, so that team members could take them in emergencies, were expected for Naruto to learn so that the unit could be more effective in any situation. There was also the type of training that he was more used to, meaning physical and taijutsu type training. Naruto had always had a lot of energy and had done his best to keep himself in peak physical condition, so this was not much an issue, despite the annoyance it gave Kotetsu and Izumo, who despite being older and more experienced, did not have unlimited energy. As for the taijutsu, Naruto knew that it was one of his weakest skills, so he made sure to listen and pay attention to whatever they were willing to impart. As busy as he was, Naruto was enjoying himself. For the first time in almost 2 years, he felt like he had something to look forward to. He was learning a lot every day, and when missions started, he would be doing higher ranked missions with an experienced team. -7. As expected, after 2 weeks, orders came down from up high telling them that they had enough training and were needed for missions again. Rado came into the training ground holding a B rank scroll with instructions within, ready to brief his team on the assignment. Well, I had hoped to keep you in the background for the first few missions, but it seems someone took notice of your tracking skills and assigned us this mission, which has been given a priority. Rado began, looking to Naruto as he spoke. Fire Capital is our biggest employer, so when a mission request comes in from them, we try to complete it as professionally and quickly as possible. It seems that recently, a new brand of opium has hit the streets of the capital. It's stronger and more dangerous than any of the other types currently on the street and has already taken the lives of a dozen people. The government would like us to track down the source and put them out of business. Naruto grinned. This is the kind of mission he had been hoping for. Occasionally he would be able to save some survivors on search and rescue missions, but for the most part it was just finding bodies and piecing together what happened. This mission, on the other hand, this was an opportunity to do some real good that would help his country, shutting down a dangerous drug distribution network at its source. Tsukumo. Rado interrupted his thinking. Since this is your first mission, I would like permission to go home with you and make sure you pack appropriately for the mission. Naruto quickly nodded, knowing that this was more of an order than a question. All right then, meet at the front gate in 45 minutes, move out. Rado ordered. Naruto quickly made his way home, motioning his commander to follow. As they arrived at his apartment, Rado looked with slight disdain at the neighborhood his new team member was living in. It wasn't the first time he had seen a ninja living out here, but it had been a while. Naruto opened his apartment door and began to gather everything he thought he would need onto the kitchen table for inspection. A few minutes later, he turned to his commander and asked, "How do these look?" Rado examined the equipment. It was sorted into 2 piles, what would be kept on his person and what would be sealing into a scroll. It looked like his new teammate had done pretty well in guessing what would be needed for this mission. Just one more thing, Rado concluded after seeing his choices. Include some civilian clothing as well. This mission might require us to go undercover in the capital to find where the drugs are coming from, and it would be best if we aren't dressed like ninja for that part. Naruto nodded at his comment before going into his bedroom and grabbing some of the few civilian-style clothing he had. He then added it to what would be sealed into the scroll and started packing the items. At this point Rado excused himself to pack himself. Naruto finished packing and decided to pay his monthly rent before he left, on the likelihood that he would not be back before the month had ended. Not that it would be a problem even if he didn't. After all, Konoha had very strict and harshly penalized laws about evicting ninja who were away on missions. Regardless, Naruto found the landlord and paid his rent while he was heading out. He then made his way to the front gate for his first B-rank mission on his new team. -7. The team made very good time to the Fire Country capital. For the first time in a long time, Naruto felt like he was where he was meant to be. At this rate, they would make it to the Fire Country capital by late night. Whether or not they would camp out beforehand was up to Rado, but not having to stop every hour to listen to Genin complain while out of breath was a dream come true. In the end, Rado did decide to camp out about half an hour away from the capital, to avoid having to pay for a room at an inn. They set up camp and due to the relative safety of the general area, decided to forego the guard, but set up a series of traps so they could sleep in peace. Tomorrow, they would check in with the local authorities and begin tracking the opium to its source. As morning approached, Naruto woke at the same time as his commander. Rado was boiling water for tea at the same time Naruto was taking a quick dip in a nearby river. After a few minutes of sitting and drinking their tea, Rado decided to wake the other two up and get started with their day. The two Chunin got up with minimal grumbling and began packing their tent and sleeping bags. Naruto and Rado deconstructed the traps and sanitized their campsite for any trace of their presence. Within minutes, they were back on their way to the capital, taking a slightly leisurely pace, due to the earliness of the morning. In just under an hour, they arrived at the outskirts of the city and Rado expertly led them to the police headquarters, where they would receive any updated information about their mission. Upon their arrival, they were quickly escorted to the police captain in charge of the case. The older and slightly overweight man looked at them with a bit of suspicion before opening a drawer and pulling out a case file. He handed it over to Rado and began. "This is what we know so far. A new brand of opium has hit the streets and we've already got 20 deaths. Normally, cities this large have inherent problems with drugs and the police deal with it accordingly, but this new brand is too dangerous for us to take our time investigating. We need this off the streets fast and we need it to disappear." Rado looked through the file, looking for common places of distribution or sections of town that were preferred by the victims. "Have you caught any of the dealers of this new brand?" "No," the captain said with dejection. "We originally had a task force set up, but it was yielding no results, so we sent for you guys. Are there any ways of distinguishing this new brand from any of the other brands on the street?" Rado continued with his questions. "Aside from the fact that it costs almost double what the other dealers are charging, it seems to be marked with red sticker. There is a picture of it in the file." The captain directed Rado to the page with the picture of the opium wrapper, where there was a red sticker visible on the wrapper. "Is the task force still in operation?" Rado asked the captain, curious if he could utilize any additional resources. "When the brass decided to call you guys, they reassigned most of the men to other cases. They left me to brief you and two of our guys to help you with your investigation," the captain said, more than a little miffed at his failure when it came to the task force. "Do you have an office or squad room we could use during our investigation?" Rado eventually asked. "I have the two men I just mentioned waiting there now. Let me escort you there." The police captain led them to a second-floor conference room, where two men were sitting. "Men, this is Rado Namiyashi from Konoha. He will be leading the investigation from here on out. You will provide him with whatever he needs and obey him as you would me for the duration of the investigation. Namiyashi-san, we have barracks downstairs prepared for you and your team during your stay here, the men can show you where. Until then, if there is anything else you need, you know where my office is." The captain left. Rado looked at the two men sitting in the small room. One of them looked eager to help with the investigation, the other looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "All right, we'll go over the evidence and information you have collected so far, then we will hit the streets and try to find the ones who are spreading this stuff. First, introduce yourselves and what your roles were before we came into the fold." Rado motioned to the cops already sitting. The helpful-looking one stood and introduced himself as Detective Watanabe, and he had been in charge of compiling all the information collected during the investigation. The other one introduced himself as Detective Fujimoto, who had a number of contacts on the street and a good understanding of the drug trafficking in the capital. Rado ordered Det. Watanabe to bring his team up to speed while he continued reading the file. No arrests made so far, 20 deaths already, and barely any leads outside of the sticker on the wrapper. He could see how the brass was losing patience with the local authorities and decided to bring them in. When Det. Watanabe had finished bringing his team up to speed, Rado took over the briefing. He opened up a map of the whole of the city and placed it on the table. Alright, first priority is finding the dealers who are spreading this stuff. Det. Fujimoto, where do you think we are most likely to find the dealers? Det. Fujimoto, who until now had tuned out what was being said, seemed to internally debate whether or not to cooperate with the ninja before deciding to just do as he was ordered. We were mostly focused on the bad sections of town, where drug activities are common, but only found regular dealers. I, however, suspect that based on the previous deaths, these dealers are going to be more common in the more active areas. Nightclubs, youth hangout spots, and universities. Places with young adults and teens with more than a bit of money to be spent. Rado nodded. That sounds like a good plan for now. He looked at his team before making his decision. Katetsu and Azumo, disguise yourselves as potential buyers and check out the universities. Look for shady people who might be selling and check them for opium and more of these red stickers. Sakumo and I will head to whatever hangout spots the detective has in mind and check there. If you don't find anything by mid-afternoon, get some rest. You're going to a nightclub tonight, Rado said with a smirk. Katetsu and Azumo nodded before pulling out some civilian clothing to change into. Within a few minutes, they were out the door. Naruto pulled his civilian clothing out as well, starting to change into it. Det. Watanabe looked at him with a worried expression, before facing Rado and voicing his concerns. Why did you bring a boy his age with you? Surely you don't expect him to go along with this mission. Rado smirked at the detective. Rest assured, while he may look like a kid, Sakumo has served Konoha for years already. Besides, I believe he might be even more useful for finding a dealer than you might think. Most dealers are suspicious by nature, but even the most suspicious dealer probably won't worry about a kid who just appears to be buying drugs for his brother. Buying for his brother? Det. Fujimoto asked. Yeah, Sakumo will approach any dealers we find, looking for one that sells the kind with the red sticker for his brother, whom his parents have grounded. Both of the detectives considered this. Dealers were suspicious of new buyers, but police never used kids to make deals, especially kids as young as this. -7. So, that is how Naruto spent his last few hours. Going up to people who were suspected of being dealers and trying to locate one who sold the kind with the red sticker. While he had found a few dealers of opium, and a lot more people who weren't, he hadn't found any that sold the new brand. Rado and Det. Fujimoto followed him as he made his approaches and every once in a while critiqued his approach method, but mostly hung back and in Det. Fujimoto's case, marked dealers for future observation or arrest. By the end of the day, he had not had any luck. No one seemed to know where the new stuff was coming from. They headed back to the station in order to let Katetsu and Azumo know they were on for the evening. When they arrived at the station, Azumo was in the briefing room reading the file of the case. Any luck? Rado asked. Azumo shook his head. We only found one person selling opium, everyone else was selling stimulants in order to stay awake and study. You. Nothing with the red sticker. Rado replied back. Looks like you two are on for this evening. Katetsu figured. He's out looking for some new clothing so we can blend in better. Rado smiled. Are you sure he's not looking for new clothing he might get lucky in? Azumo smirked. Hey, whatever helps us blend in. Rado turned to Det. Fujimoto. What clubs would you recommend we start with? Det. Fujimoto considered for a moment before pointing to two places on the map. The Flamethrower and the Aces are probably your best bets. They both have a reputation for being wild hangouts for teens and young adults. Rado nodded. Alright, why don't you go home and get some rest? Tomorrow we'll brief you on our findings and go from there. Det. Fujimoto looked like he might want to come along for the clubs, but wasn't one to turn down free time. Fine, See you tomorrow morning. Tsukumo, scout out these two clubs and report back to me in 2 hours on what the best Overwatch positions are. Azumo and Katetsu will enter the clubs together with me and you will stay back to watch for any suspicious people entering or leaving. Once every half an hour, one of us will meet with you to check out any of the people you flag. Naruto listened to his commander's orders. He rechecked the map to confirm the locations of the clubs before heading out to scout ahead. -7. Naruto watched as Katetsu and Azumo entered into the flamethrower. This would be the second club of the night. The first one had gone according to plan and they had spent 2 hours looking for any dealers to no avail. Naruto had watched from the rooftops across the street for anyone that looked suspicious. As this was his first time even seeing a nightclub, he wasn't quite sure what suspicious meant and by the second check-in from the others, had told them that. Azumo, the person checking in with him at the time, assured him that it would come with experience. At the second location, Naruto was once more watching the people in line waiting for the club when he noticed people leaving the club. What was unusual was that they had just entered the club only a few minutes ago and had skipped the line. Naruto made a shadow clone to follow them as they seemed to be going into an alley behind the club. The shadow clone observed the small group walk up to a man he hadn't noticed before. He watched them exchange money for what looked like opium. Quickly he dispelled himself to alert his creator. As Naruto absorbed the memories from his recently created clone, he pondered whether this dealer would have the products that they sought. He suspected it would be at least 10 more minutes before one of the others checked on him again and decided to make another clone to keep an eye on the dealer, just in case. Roughly 15 minutes later, Katetsu walked out of the club to check on him. Naruto quickly told him about the dealer he had seen and Katetsu admitted that was probably the best lead they had at the moment. He re-entered the club to fetch the rest of the team to alert them of Tsukumo's find. 10 minutes later, the team was assembled on the rooftop, replacing the clone that had been watching the dealer. They backed away from the edge of the roof to have a conversation without him hearing. Any indication he might be different from the ones we saw earlier today? Rado asked Naruto. Some of the people that were allowed to skip the line waiting for the club were the ones I saw buying from him. That might indicated that his stuff is better than what you might find among the other dealers. Naruto explained his thinking. Rado considered what he had said before agreeing with his thinking. Alright, Azumo, Katetsu, you play the role of the buyer's looker for better opium. Tsukumo and myself will remain here to watch him. If he has any of the red sticker opium, don't alert him, just buy some and get back here. If it ends up being him, we will keep an eye on him to see where he goes. Azumo and Katetsu nodded before heading back to the club to make it look like they are coming from that direction. Naruto observed them doing a buy from the dealer. In the end, they returned a few minutes later, confirming that it was indeed the red sticker brand. Rado nodded at their results. Alright, Azumo and Katetsu, return to the station and get some sleep. In 5 hours, I'll send Tsukumo for you to replace us. Azumo and Katetsu nodded, before returning to the station. Naruto settled into the rooftop, he figured he would be here for a while. -7. Naruto and Rado continued observation of their suspect. For the next 4 hours, he remained in his position waiting for buyers to come to him. At around 2 a.m., when he hadn't had any customers for a while, he apparently decided to pack it in. Rado and Naruto tracked him from a distance, sticking to rooftops as he traveled. Eventually, he made his way to an apartment building in a nearby section of town. They both moved in closer, but carefully to see which apartment he would enter. Fortunately, he was on the first floor, so they did not lose track of which apartment he entered. Unfortunately, his windows were closed and covered, so they could not keep watch inside. An hour later, Rado sent Naruto to collect his teammates from the station, so they could take over watch. Naruto collected the two, who were fast asleep at the time and brought them to the apartment building. Rado ordered the two of them to keep watch on the building, but allowed for them to sleep in shifts as long as one of them was watching. He then took Naruto and led him back to the station so they could get some sleep. The next morning, Naruto and Rado awoke early in order to brief the two detectives and take over watch of their suspect. The night had been a little short for Naruto's taste, but was used to being awoken for the purpose of taking missions. Naruto stretched out his muscles as he walked back to the briefing room to see if the local detectives were here yet. Det. Fujimoto was already here ready to continue, whereas the other detective was not here yet. Naruto had come to suspect that while Det. Watanabe had a better attitude toward the ninja guests, he was strictly a 9-to-5 worker. On the other hand, Det. Fujimoto was a man who got invested in whatever case he was pursuing and did whatever was needed for the case to be completed. How did your investigation go last night? Det. Fujimoto asked, as soon as he saw the two ninja. Naruto looked to Rado, who was making himself a cup of tea. Rado nodded to Naruto. Naruto understood and began to brief Det. Fujimoto. We were able to spot a dealer at the Flamethrower Club last night. Azumo and Katetsu bought some opium from him and were able to confirm that it appears to be the same as we were looking for. Rado and I watched him for a while as he continued to deal drugs, then followed him to his apartment. The other two are watching him now. You didn't arrest him? Det. Fujimoto asked. Rado at this point cut into the conversation. No, for now we will keep watch and see if he can lead us to his source. We can arrest him later if we get nothing from him in the next couple days. Det. Fujimoto nodded, understanding what they were trying to accomplish. Rado turned to Naruto. Tsukumo, why don't you go and relieve Azumo and Katetsu? The suspect will probably still be sleeping right now, but if he gets up anytime soon, follow him from afar and don't get too close. Make a note on everywhere he goes and everyone he talks to. Naruto nodded and headed out the door. He made his way back to the apartment building by roof hopping, but also trying to remain unseen by the civilian population. He quickly arrived at the apartment building and spotted his teammates on the same roof as last night. He made his way over to them as Katetsu saw him coming. Tsukumo, here to relieve us? Katetsu asked. Azumo turned around from where he was watching the building to nod at Naruto. Yep. Rado wants you two back at the briefing room. Looks like we're going to be watching him for a few days, hoping he leads us to his source. Any activity? Naruto told the others the gist of the current plan. All quiet, Azumo said, getting ready to head back to the police station. Keep your head down, Katetsu said, as he and Azumo left. Naruto re-familiarized himself with the building before sending a clone to the opposite side of the building for safety. He settled in for a while, suspecting that the suspect had a better night's sleep than he did. Naruto continued his watch for a couple of hours until he saw the suspect exiting the building. Now that it was day out, he could see the suspect much better. He was about 6 feet tall and had both short hair and a light beard. Naruto could see a combination of muscle and fat beneath his baggy clothing. He took down notes of his approximate height, weight, hair, and body type. The man looked like he was going somewhere, but Naruto didn't know where. He motioned for his clone to stay behind and wait for his team if they came looking. For the next hour, Naruto followed the man as he went about his routine. The man went to a cafe where he had a coffee for the first half hour, but left soon after he finished his drink. After that, he just seemed to walk around town for a while. Naruto hadn't seen him speaking to anyone or going anyplace in particular, so was quite curious about what he was doing. Around this time, he felt his clone dispel, telling him that Rado had arrived at the apartment building with Det. Fujimoto. It seemed that Rado was quite surprised to find out he could make shadow clones, but had passed along a message to keep following the suspect. It seemed that Det. Fujimoto had obtained a warrant to search the apartment and they were going to try to discover the man's identity and anything else they may find. They would be keeping everything in place, so as not to alert the suspect, but wanted to give the detectives at least something to investigate while the ninja were watching him. Naruto made another clone to send back to the apartment to oversee what, if anything, they had found and to brief Rado on his current location. After a few more minutes it seemed that the suspect had finally settled into an alleyway across from a park. There was already a teenager waiting for him when he arrived and Naruto witnessed another drug deal, as he had last night. It seemed Naruto had found his day-dealing spot. He hoped that if he was this busy, he would run out of product soon and have to restock his baggy jacket. He produced a clone with his current memories and dispelled it, transferring his current memories to the clone that had gone to meet Rado, so that his commander would have his current location. An hour later, his clone dispelled, signaling him that the search was over and that Kotetsu would be relieving him in 1 hour. They hadn't discovered any other drugs at his apartment, so the only supply the suspect had was on his person. In fact, they hadn't discovered much of anything at the apartment. It seemed that he only used it for sleeping and storing useless crap. What they hadn't found were any documents on who he was or who his supplier was. Naruto continued waiting and keeping an eye on the suspect, but the man continued to stay in the alley and deal to the occasional teenager. Naruto sent a few clones after the first few teenagers, but they mostly went home or to hang out with friends after they had scored their drugs. Naruto did note, however, that the teenagers all seemed to come from average or above average families when it came to wealth. Or at least that is what he observed from his following the teenagers to their homes. Naruto sensed a presence approaching him and turned to see Kotetsu hopping over from the adjacent rooftop. Naruto gave him a bit of a wave, checked on the suspect once more, and headed over to meet him. Learn anything? Kotetsu asked. Naruto shrugged as he responded. He likes coffee in the morning and then just wandered around for a bit before coming here to deal. He had a customer here waiting for him and has had people come up to him every 20 minutes or so to buy. Almost all of them are teenagers. My clones followed a few of them home or to friends to make sure. Yeah, why didn't you tell us you could make shadow clones? Kotetsu asked. Well, this is our first mission together, and I told you I knew quite a few jutsu. Besides, we only met a few days ago. Naruto replied. Okay, head back to the station and brief the others on what you found. Kotetsu directed, taking Naruto's former place on the rooftop. Naruto returned to the police station to tell the remainder of his team and the detectives what he had observed. The detectives weren't happy that he was selling mostly to teenagers, but they were glad to finally have a lead on this case. -7. It turned out that as Kotetsu's watch was ending and Azumo's was about to begin, the suspect made a trip to a warehouse on the eastern outskirts of town. He was only in there for a few minutes, but it was a strong indication that the team had found the source for the opium. Azumo was still watching the suspect, but now that they had a more promising lead, they could choose when to bring him in for arrest. Rado, surprised with Naruto's abilities, had decided to allow him to do the initial investigation into the warehouse. Naruto would be using a shadow clone, under a genjutsu, to infiltrate the warehouse and confirm that this was the location they had been seeking. Naruto's clone would learn the approximate layout, confirm the presence of the drugs, do a head count of the people inside, and take a look at the security before dispelling. Naruto's clone entered from a loose window in the back. Briefly looking around the room to make sure he was alone, he slipped in behind some boxes and inspected the contents, empty. It seems that they weren't using this particular section of the warehouse. He added chakra to his feet to make sure his footsteps were as silent as possible and proceeded to move around the edge of the warehouse to scout out as much of the area before moving to the entrance. As he saw previously, much of the building was empty and they were only using this warehouse for its location in a less populated section of town. Naruto clone worked his way to the entrance where he saw 3 men huddled around a few small boxes that seemed to contain the opium they were selling. For the moment, Naruto merely memorized each man for a description later. Naruto then moved back to his original entry point in order to scout out the other parts of the warehouse that he missed. As expected, they were empty. Seeing all there was to see, Naruto made sure he was as far away as he could be from the men and dispelled himself. The real Naruto waited outside with Rado and the detectives. He closed his eyes when he felt the influx of memories and spent a few minutes reviewing them before nodding to Rado. It went unnoticed. He reassured the others that his clone had not been discovered. There is only 3 men and they are near the front entrance. They have a few small boxes of opium, but the rest of the warehouse is unused. If we entered through the same way my clone did, we could take them quietly. Naruto briefed. Rado nodded. Truthfully, he hadn't expected much, but there was a possibility they were growing the opium in the warehouse and keeping people inside to farm it, so he wanted it to be scouted first. Alright, I don't think we can wait until they get their next shipment of drugs, so we need to take the warehouse and arrest the men. Rado decided after he thought about it. Tsukumo, what are the chances that you can track the drugs back from their destinations? Naruto considered this question. He had never attempted to track an object to its source before and wasn't sure he could do that. He wasn't even sure the sense would even be viable, seeing as how he didn't know when they had gotten here. I'm not sure. If we know who imported them, it might be possible for me to track the scent back to the source. But with all the traffic coming in and out of the capital every day, it's probably unlikely. I would like to try to find a scent immediately after taking the warehouse. But this is more likely going to be resolved by questioning the guys in the warehouse. Rado nodded. Alright. Keep watch on the warehouse with the detectives. Don't take any action without me other than following the people if they leave. I will get the others and return in a bit. Naruto watched Rado sprint off to collect the others. Det. Watanabe asked. If there are only 3 men, can't the 2 of you take them? Especially if you can make solid copies of yourself. Naruto turned to the man and replied. Now that we've found this place, we can concentrate our efforts here. The suspect we've been following up until now is more likely going to be turned over to you. We know where he lives and where he deals, so you can pick him up at your convenience. Once we move on this warehouse, if we are able to get an indication of where they are coming from, we may have to head out immediately before the trail goes cold. Likewise, this is more likely going to come down to questioning the people inside. If they know they are up against a ninja force instead of local police, they are much more likely to cooperate. A few minutes later, Rado returned with his teammates. A rough plan was formed to take the men inside without them even realizing it. Rado, Katetsu, and Azuma would enter through the back and prepare to knock out the men from behind. Naruto would knock on the door a few minutes later to get their attention while the others carried out the plan. 15 minutes later, Naruto was walking up to the door, wearing a henge of the drug dealer they had been following for safety. He checked his watch before loudly knocking on the door. Naruto could hear a faint struggle on the other side of the door, but other than that, nothing. A minute later, Katetsu opened the door for him. As expected, his senior teammates had successfully subdued the 3 men. Naruto went right to work in examining and sniffing the boxes of opium, trying to get a scent. Unfortunately, Naruto couldn't really get anything. From the scent around the warehouse, he supposed that the drugs had been here for a month and it would be almost impossible to track with the level of traffic surrounding the capital. He turned to Rado and shook his head. I could try circling the capital and try to pick up an entry point, but I think these have been here for about a month, and with all the traffic coming in and out of the capital, it's a long shot. Rado nodded, expecting this result. Alright. Go ahead and try. We'll set up in here for the interrogation, so come back when you're done. Naruto nodded. This would be the first time having a mission that required a real interrogation, and despite his thirst for new mission experiences, he wasn't in a hurry to learn about this particular skill. -7. Naruto circled the capital as planned, searching for any scent of the opium. Unfortunately, the brand of opium he was looking for wasn't exactly a unique scent different from the usual brands and came from many different places, so he wasn't able to even confirm an entry point for the capital. Reluctantly, he returned to report his failure to Rado at the warehouse. As he entered, he expected to hear the sound of screams, but fortunately was spared that particular burden. Ninja interrogation was feared by many due to the lack of restraint and due to the number of torture experts that they were famous for having. He made his way over to where Rado was standing, next to one of the captives. When Rado looked at him, Naruto shook his head to indicate a negative. His commander understood his lack of success. By unspoken agreement, Naruto was kept out of the interrogations for the next day. Naruto supposed that he should feel slighted that he wasn't included, but even he felt he was too young for this. Eventually, one of the men broke and revealed that they were getting the same opium as everyone else in town, they just knew a doctor that could make it more effective. Within a few minutes of learning that, the police agreed to give one of the suppliers, and only one of them, a lighter sentence to the one who revealed who this doctor was and how to find them. The next day, the police arrested a doctor from the main hospital. The doctor was using chemicals he had access to at the hospital to make the drugs more effective, but it also made the drugs more dangerous. Naruto was surprised at this piece of information. He had thought that the conclusion of the mission would end with his team tracking down and burning a field of poppies along with killing whoever was growing them. Another thing that bugged him at first was the announcement to the public that the police had figured it out all on their own. According to the newspaper, the captain they had spoken to on the first day had led a task force to track down many of the opium dealers and were able to find the warehouse and doctor completely on their own. When he griped about this to his team, they laughed it off. Ninjas do the work and don't get the credit. That's the way the world works. Katetsu explained, as if those two sentences explained everything. Azumo took pity on him and explained further. Ninjas don't officially exist when it comes to missions like this. We are expected to solve whatever problems people are having quietly and then act like we were never there. One of the things the client gets for our work is anonymity. Unless you are speaking to a superior, you are expected to let them take the credit. Rado nodded his head, agreeing with Azumo's explanation. Alright, let's head back to Konoha. Chapter 8. One day after Naruto's first B-rank mission. Naruto walked through the gate with his teammates for his first completed mission. He turned his head to his commander, Rado, to hear the expected, "Good job, now go home and rest." "Good job, men. Now, let's go to the training ground and get some taijutsu practice in," Rado said. Naruto nodded along and almost took a step to go home when he comprehended what his commander had said. Wait, taijutsu practice, he thought. He could see Katetsu looking at him with a smirk on his face. Still daylight left, isn't there? Yes, there is, Rado confirmed, also looking at Naruto. We take lots of missions and we train every day that we can. We will likely get another mission tomorrow morning, so rest accordingly tonight. Rado left no room for argument. Naruto sighed and thought, I guess I did ask for this. They returned to their training ground and trained their taijutsu skills for the remainder of the day. Once again, Naruto fought against Azumo, the second worst taijutsu fighter on the team, although he was leagues ahead of Naruto without genjutsu. A couple hours into their training, Naruto asked why they weren't training any other skills. We didn't fight at all on this mission. When we don't fight on a mission, we fight in training, Rado said simplistically. By the time their training was finished and before Naruto left to limp his way home, Rado had left to report mission success to his superiors and returned with a new B-rank mission for tomorrow. He told them to prepare for a bandit mission and be at the front gate by 7 in the morning. As soon as he arrived home, Naruto stumbled into the shower and allowed the water to rinse most of the grime and dirt away from his body. He scrubbed a few places that needed it before getting some food into his stomach and passing out on the bed. Today's taijutsu exercise had been the hardest since his first day at Fire Temple. -8. Morning came too soon for Naruto's taste, but his rest allowed him to recover most of his strength from the grueling training they had done yesterday. Naruto spent the early morning carefully stretching out his muscles, making sure he hadn't pulled one of them and getting ready for the day. He ate a light breakfast and repacked his bag for a bandit mission. A while later, he was out the door and headed to the front gate to meet his team. As it was a few minutes to 7, he was the last one to arrive. Hey, he's awake. You owe me 100 ryo, Azumo, Katetsu said as soon as he was in sight. Azumo frowned. With yesterday's training, he shouldn't be able to move that well, he thought. Indeed, he had been thinking they might have gone overboard a bit at the end. Rado frowned as well. Usually it was a little tradition that the newest member of the team would have to be pulled out of bed the first few missions to acclimate them to this sort of mission and training schedule. Unfortunately, since their newest member had made it in time, that tradition might be over. Alright, this is a standard bandit eradication mission. Intelligence indicates that this bandit group might be led by a missing nin, however, so we're up. The rest of the team nodded to show that they understood. Naruto himself was a little anxious. After 3 years of being a ninja, he had yet to go up against another ninja in a real fight. Alright, the bandit group is reported to be near the southern coast of River Country, so let's head out. Rado started to make for one of the western roads that would lead them to River Country. Soon he was traveling at a low Chunin level pace. He made sure to check on Tsukumo from time to time to make sure he wasn't injured or too tired from yesterday's session, but to his surprise, he was keeping up. The team continued at this approximate pace for the next few hours and stopped near a river to catch some fish for lunch. At this point, Kotetsu and Azuma were started to complain about their current pace. Yesterday's training might have been nothing new to them, but unlike Naruto, they didn't have a Biju to use as a backup battery, not that any of them knows that. At this point, Rado decided to give up trying to exhaust Tsukumo and focus on getting his team ready for the mission. It wouldn't do to have his entire team too exhausted to fight against a missing nin of unknown strength. Shame, he thought. Azuma and Kotetsu really hated that tradition when they were just starting out. It would have made them feel better to let someone else experience it. On this note, Rado decided to extend the break by a few hours and let his team relax. It was a nice day after all. After lunch and a nap for his cute little Chunin, Rado once again ordered them to move out. This time they moved toward river country at a more moderate pace, but were still able to maintain a good speed. -8. After another day of travel they arrived at the approximate location of the bandit group. Naruto suspected this is where he could display some of his skills in finding the bandits. If there was one thing Naruto learned from his days in search and rescue, it was that there was always a bandit group near major roads. Unless you have a better way of tracking down the group, we should travel along the major roads and look for recent activity. Rado looked at Naruto and pondered what he had said. His group had a lot of experience fighting bandits and lower-rank ninja, but not a lot of tracking experience. Eventually, he nodded to Naruto to go ahead. Naruto led them along the major roads until he sighted a rock outcropping overlooking a large portion of the road. He made a detour to examine the spot as a possible lookout position for bandits. As he expected, when he arrived he found recent signs that there was someone observing traffic along the roads. Naruto was able to pick up a few scents that led into the forest. He informed his team and they were in hot pursuit of the scent. About 5 minutes later, they slowed down due to definite signs of a large group passing this way. Rado once again took over as lead for the group, now that the trail was obvious. The ninja slowly made their way through the treetops, paying close attention to anyone nearby. After another 5 minutes, they came upon the outskirts of the bandit camp. It was indeed a large bandit group of about 150 men. If Naruto were alone or with a genin team, he would not try to engage this group. Rado retreated with the group to a safe distance to hold a short meeting. Good job on finding the group, Tsukumo. Rado first congratulated his newest teammate, knowing that it would have taken longer without him. Let's scout out the layout, potential hostages, location of the leaders, and if one of them has ninja training. Keep your distances and suppress your chakra. Spread out and observe. We'll meet back here in 90 minutes. Azuma and Kotetsu each took one of the sides of the bandit camp while Rado directed Naruto to take up position where they were before, while he circled around to the other side. Naruto returned to their previous position while trying to remain as stealthy as possible. He stayed as hidden as possible and kept his chakra ready to instigate a genjutsu on anyone that might become aware of him. Naruto secured himself in his position for another minute before he calmed down enough to start observing the bandit group. He took note of the number of tents, where they stored the valuables they collected, and where they kept their hostages. From what Naruto had observed, they set up a brothel near the north side of their camp, where men were frequently entering and exiting. He had no idea where the leadership was and had seen no sign of any ninja. He continued observing for more than an hour before starting to make his way back to their meeting spot. He waited at the meeting spot for a few minutes, waiting for the others to arrive one by one. After Rado had returned from the other side, he held a briefing to determine their attack plan. Did anyone get eyes on any ninja? He asked. Naruto shook his head no as he saw Azuma and Kotetsu do the same. Neither did I, he said shortly. How about the leadership? Again, Naruto shook his head no, along with Kotetsu. Azuma, however, looked pensive. Rado turned to Azuma and made a motion for him to explain. I can't say for sure. Azuma began, but I did notice that some of the bandits were behaving better around the southeastern portion. Usually bandits are only quiet right before a raid and well behaved in front of their leadership. It could be that their leader was passing through that area, or it could be that his tent is in the area. Rado nodded, imagining the layout of the camp in his head and imagining the southeastern portion. Well, that area did seem a bit cleaner than the northern portion. Naruto gave a small shudder as he remembered what was in the northern portion. Tsukumo, how many clones can you make? Rado asked. Depends on what type. I was warned not to make too many shadow clones because it can lead to chakra exhaustion or worse, but if I had a stable water source, I could make dozens of water clones. They only have about 10% of my power, but against bandits, they should take out a considerable chunk of them before being defeated. Naruto answered, slightly put out that he was trying to hide his massive chakra reserves. Rado nodded. Well, there is a river 100 meters to the west. Focus on making as many clones as you can and sending them into the camp. Try to send them into the camp in waves, so the bandits think that our force is larger than it is. Katetsu and I will wait on the east side, waiting for the ninja, if there is one, to reveal himself. Katetsu and I will deal with any bandit that tries to flee the battle, and if the ninja appears, I will engage him. Azumo, you are in charge of securing the hostages in the north side. As soon as Tsukumo's first wave hits the camp, clear out the men and secure the hostages. All three nodded their heads at the plan and prepared themselves. Naruto was glad that he hadn't been given Azumo's job of securing the women. Rado confirmed that they understood his plan. Good. Take 10 minutes to get into position, and start the operation when Tsukumo sends his first wave. Tsukumo, try to start when no one is near the river, but if it isn't clear in the next half hour, wait until it is mostly empty. -8. 15 minutes later, Naruto was standing in the trees near the river. Naruto observed a bandit taking a bath in the river. Funny, I didn't think bandits knew how to bathe, he thought to himself. A few minutes later, the bandit finished and made his way back to the camp. Naruto took one final look around before jumping down to the water. He stood upon it, with the first chakra control exercise he had learned and prepared to make water clones. He knew that he had deceived the others by understating how much chakra he had, but hopefully they wouldn't notice the shadow clones he would be slipping in with the water clones. The shadow clones would be able to use his primary skill of genjutsu and help the water clones be more victorious. He quickly ran through the hand seals to make 20 water clones and created an extra 5 shadow clones to send in as well. He gave the clones an attack sign and watched as they charged the camp. He observed the clones as they started their assault before turning back to the water to make a dozen more. -8. Azumo hung back quietly just outside camp in the treetops. This wasn't exactly his favorite assignment, but stood ready to do it. He hung out here, mentally preparing himself for the degradation that he was about to observe, and waited for the attack of the clones. It came so suddenly that he was almost surprised by it himself. One moment he was observing the camp as it went about its deceptively peaceful ways, the next, men were screaming and everyone was confused about what was happening. Azumo took this as his signal and hanged himself into a bandit to get into position. In the confusion, no one noticed a bandit that nobody knew, slipping into the tent holding the women. Once inside, Azumo stabbed the guards with kunai and threw shuriken at the backs of the men currently assaulting the women. They cried out in pain, but it seemed to be lost in all the confusion happening outside. -8. Rado and Katetsu observed the scene of the bandits being assaulted by clones. They had the best vantage point and had observed Tsukumo's clones surprising the bandits and taking a tenth of them out of the fight before they even knew what was going on. After a minute, however, they could see the confusion lessening, while fury and control had returned to the bandits. Rado paid special attention to who was trying to return control to the bandits, hoping to spot some ninja techniques to highlight his target. He trusted that Katetsu was taking out the men that had fled in the initial confusion and would continue to do so as more men fell in battle. There. As one of the men emerged from a tent, Rado saw that no less than 8 bandits turned to him, to ask him what to do. Rado could see that the man was keeping himself calm and was paying attention to the clones, only to smirk when he saw one of the clones burst into water. Rado began his approach as the leader ordered his men to deal with the clones. He moved quickly while remaining as quiet as possible. He noticed one of the bandits ahead of him turn around, eyes widening as he saw a ninja approaching from behind. Rado abandoned stealth and focused on speed, intent on taking out the ninja before he spotted him. He threw a pair of shuriken at the ninja, while his back was still turned. -8. Kuhei heard the cries and confusion of his men, wondering what was going on. As he listened to the sounds and prepared himself, he knew of only two things it could be. Either it was another bandit group, fighting for control of this area, unlikely, or it was a ninja raid. As he emerged from his tent, he could see what looked like a dozen ninja fighting against his men. But that couldn't be, his bandits weren't worth that much trouble. He observed the ninja for a few seconds before he noticed that they were all the same, clones then. At that point he saw one of them burst into water. Water clones, and due to the fact that the ninja who made them is so short, probably a genin team, he thought. But if this is a genin team, where is the Jonin? He heard one of his men gasp while looking behind him before grabbing the man and using him as a shield. Two shuriken hit the man's chest, causing him to gasp and send a look of betrayal at his leader. Kuhei gazed disinterested at his fallen subordinate before turning his attention to the approaching Jonin. Ah, there he is. -8. Rado engaged the missing nin, switching between taijutsu, kunai, and the occasional jutsu. His opponent was good, better than most of the bandit leaders who typically only had a few years of genin level experience. You're pretty good, the missing nin told him. But what are you going to do when my partner kills your genin? Partner, Rado said, while also in his head questioning why he said genin. That's right, you didn't think it was just me, did you? He's not as good as me, but he should make short work of your genin students. The missing nin taunted. Rado smirked at the missing nin while he made the connection of what he was referring to. Oh, I see. Are you talking about the one making the clones? He's not a genin, he's a chunin, and he's the rookie member of our team. Rado responded, wiping the smirk off the face of his opponent. At this comment the missing nin did look a little sick, realizing that he might be telling the truth, if that was indeed the truth. In fact, now that he thought about it, was that a second wave of clones? -8. Naruto was actually sending in his third wave of clones. These ones were actually half water clones and half shadow clones, and only 10 of them. Naruto wanted to make it seem like he was running low, so that the bandits wouldn't retreat, but also wouldn't advance on his position. As he absorbed the memories of his fallen shadow clones, he could tell that he had already beaten roughly half of the bandits. He had observed Rado fighting the ninja leader from afar and noticed the bandits steering clear of the area they were holding the women, so the others were doing their jobs. As another clone dispelled, Naruto found himself suddenly nervous. His clone had been dispelled by someone who looked just like all the other bandits, but who moved like a ninja. In fact, according to where his clone was standing, he was probably on his way here. Naruto quickly made another wave of clones, to send into the bandits away from the path the bandit ninja was headed toward him. He prepared himself both physically and mentally for what might be a tough fight. As the ninja approached, Naruto could observe that he was indeed dressed like a bandit, as a form of camouflage. He held a sword, but unlike the other bandits, Naruto could tell that he knew how to use it other than the basic, pointy end goes in the other guy, strategy that the rest of the bandits seemed to know. Naruto decided to stick with what he knew and not hold back. He started preparing to cast genjutsu while drawing a pair of kunai, one for each hand. The other nin, seemingly in a hurry to destroy the creator of the clones, rushed him. He approached in with a basic Batojutsu stance, to draw his sword with maximum speed and strength. Naruto dodged by ducking under the blade and attacking from the side. The bandit quickly sidestepped his attack and attacked him once again with the sword. Naruto was having trouble with his normal strategy. Normally when he practiced this, his opponent was either unarmed or didn't know how to use a sword. Every time that Naruto saw an opening that he tried to exploit, he would have to sacrifice his attack halfway through in order to defend. Naruto created the illusion of an open target for the bandit to strike, and when he did Naruto was able to get a few minor cuts into the other ninja, but nothing serious. Eventually, Naruto decided to put some distance between himself and the sword user and try ninjutsu. He backed off, tucking the kunai back into his pouch and let his hands fly through seals. As the ninja approached, Naruto unleashed a great fireball directly at his target. Naruto remained on alert as the smoke cleared, revealing a wooden log. Kawarimi, Naruto thought. He jumped to the side as he was alerted to some movement in the corner of his eye. A pair of shurikens sailed by his last location as Naruto tried to find their source. He created a couple of shadow clones and sent them into the forest the shuriken had come from while staying on high alert. Confused as to where the other ninja was, Naruto decided to go for a little stealth himself. He created dozens of regular incorporeal clones along with a single shadow clone. He then used the Earth Release Underground Move 1 jutsu to sink into the ground, hoping the enemy would mistake his shadow clone for him. A minute later, the enemy ninja burst out of the water, into the clones and correctly picked out the correct corporeal clone. The shadow clone dodged in order to get the enemy into correct position when Naruto struck. He successfully grabbed one of the feet of the enemy ninja and dragged him underground. The enemy was good and able to stop himself before he fell too far in, but at that point one of his legs was almost completely underground with a good portion of his other leg. The clone capitalized on this momentum by hurtling a pair of kunai at the ninja, one which was hidden by a genjutsu. The ninja blocked the visible kunai, but unfortunately, this exposed his shoulder to the hidden kunai. Even more unfortunate for him was that it was his sword arm's shoulder and it caused him to forget about the enemy underneath him. When he felt a kunai pierce his back, he knew it was all over. -8. Rado finished up with the missing nin a few minutes later. He was good for a missing nin, but even he couldn't go up against a Konoha Jonin for long. He became more aware of his surroundings to see that with their leader dead, the remainder of the bandits decided that now was a good time to flee. He rushed toward the north, where a majority were fleeing and started to finish off the rest. Within a few minutes, Rado had stabbed the last bandit and looked around to see if there was anyone else. Since it was the northern part of the camp, he made a call out to his companion, that should be in the area. Azumo, are you secure? Azumo poked his head out of the large tent that held the women. Hey, all secure here. We done. There may be another ninja, have you seen any others? Rado asked. Azumo shook his head in the negative. Alright, look for Kotetsu and see if he needs any help with the bandits who managed to get away. I'll check with Tsukumo. Rado ordered the Chunin as he headed for the river. As he arrived at the river, he found a single bandit, halfway buried in the earth, but no Tsukumo. It was not until a few minutes later that Tsukumo himself turned up back at the camp. Tsukumo, where have you been? Rado demanded. I fought a ninja who was dressed up like a bandit. We fought for a while before I was able to beat him. After that, the bandits nearby that saw our fight decided to flee. I followed most of them as they were headed south to finish them off. Naruto responded. Rado listened to his response and calmed down a bit. He directed Tsukumo to scout out the camp and look for any stragglers that needed to be finished off while he checked on the hostages. He hoped they came from someplace close that he could drop them off on the way home. -8. The team reunited and spent the rest of the day cleaning up the camp. The bodies of the bandits were collected and burned, the women were spread out in tents and given food and basic medical treatment, and the missing nin were identified. The missing nin Rado had fought was an AIM B rank missing nin identified as Kuhei Inaga. The ninja Naruto had fought was unidentified, but thought to be either too low rank to be known or a student of Kuhei's. After they collected everything of value from the camp, Rado began to organize a journey to return the women to their villages. It turns out that all but one of the women originated from two of the adjacent towns, one to the east and the other to the west. Rado sent Azumo and Kotetsu ahead to each of the villages with a list of the women they had recovered and to let them make preparations to take them back in. Rado and Naruto then each took half of the women, to start the journey to the towns. The towns were not far from the camp, but at civilian pace, especially wounded and weak civilian pace, it took a couple of days. Once the women were safely back home, the ninja agreed to reunite once again at the bandit camp, in case they missed anything. They performed a deeper look around the camp, now that they didn't have women looking over their shoulders, and found a few stashes that contained some of the monetary loot from their raids. Since this was a larger bandit force, it was quite substantial. They decided to camp here, since it was so late in the day, but that didn't stop them from having a brief training session, to remind them of what they would be doing once they returned to Konoha. The next day they set out for their return back to their village. Once again, Rado led them at a speed that ensured that by lunchtime, everyone was breathing heavily. Apparently, Now that they were not headed to a mission, there was no harm in exhausting their team. During their lunch break, Rado made Naruto recount every aspect of his fight, and his team spent most of their time analyzing what he had done correctly and, more importantly, where he had screwed up. Changing the fighting dynamic might have been the correct thing to do, but losing track of him the moment you did was a very foolish thing. Rado scolded him. You gave him too much time to recognize the fireball coming and should have expected him to use a Kawarimi to escape. You should have tracked his Kawarimi and hit him again. Azumo and Kotetsu nodded in agreement. Naruto frowned at his team ganging up on him, but reminded himself of why he chose this team. Then could you help me with those sort of situations when we return to Konoha? Rado grinned slightly to himself. At least the kid is willing to work on his faults, he thought to himself. Sure, we'll run you into the ground with more training. Azumo and Kotetsu smirked while Naruto grimaced. -8. For the next few months, this is the way their team had gone about. They took a B rank mission, traveled as fast as possible while still being fresh for their mission, then trained hard when in Konoha. They then repeated this much faster than Naruto was used to. The variety of missions was also a new experience for Naruto. He was used to missions happening almost the exact same way, with only the details being different. In the last few months his team had done protection missions for wealthy clients, delivery of valuable goods, more bandit eradications, even an industrial espionage mission. Naruto struggled to go along with this sort of routine, but he felt like sometimes he was just barely keeping up. The training was hard, the missions were new, and he barely had any time to do anything other than sleep. Indeed, he hadn't even been able to visit Hannah since he started. His team was on its way to yet another B-rank mission. Their team had been set up to take another mission when a call for backup had come into the mission office. A single Chunin who was investigating civil unrest in cities to the south discovered that there were enemy spies trying to instigate riots and requested backup to apprehend the spies and quell the riots. So they were now on their way to Toyozato, a large city in the south, near the border of T country. As Naruto had come to expect from Rado, they rushed here at full speed, only slowing down to make sure they were fresh for the mission. When they arrived in the city, they made their way to the rally point the Chunin had said he would be. Upon looking around for their comrade, the team found him, much to their surprise. To Naruto, the Chunin was vaguely familiar. To everyone else, it was a short Chunin, even shorter than their own short Chunin. It was Itachi Uchiha. Once the novelty of being briefed by such a small child wore off, they listened carefully to the briefing. After investigating the leads that the local detectives had produced, I went undercover in some of the less reputable areas. It was there that I discovered, quite by accident, one of the people who was deliberately trying to rile people up. Itachi briefed, in an almost monotone voice. I listened to some of the things that the man was saying before calling for police backup to arrest the man. I investigated some of the things he was saying and found out that there has been a series of small crimes that are linked to what he doing. What kind of crimes? Rado asked. For instance, a few days ago the payroll money was stolen from a steelworkers factory, so the management was unable to pay its workers. The spy then used this as a point to rile up the workers and told them that they would be working for free soon. That any trust they placed in management would only allow them to take advantage of the situation and reduce their wages permanently. Itachi explained rationally. If these two incidences are connected, which I believe they are, it means that there is some sort of conspiracy to rile up the people and create civil unrest. Although I have no idea who is behind it at this point or to what end they're doing this. Rado listened to Itachi's briefing and, after thinking carefully, agreed with his determination. All right. Itachi will continue to brief me on everything he has discovered. Azumo and Kotetsu, you will go to where the police are holding the man and begin an interrogation to find out what else he has planned, who his accomplices are, and whatever else you can find out. Tsukumo, go with them and get his scent, then create as many clones as you can to try and track his across the city, see if you can find any of the other places he has been. Rado turned to Itachi and asked, where did you arrest him? Itachi gave him the location and Rado ordered Naruto to start there after he had gotten his scent. The team then broke apart to begin their assignments. Naruto followed Azumo and Kotetsu to the police station to get his scent and begin his search. He didn't have a great record of tracking within cities, but it wasn't a bad idea to start with during the first few stages of an investigation. Naruto got the scent and returned to the bar to try and locate a trail from the spy. As expected, he was able to pick up the man's scent from within the bar, but was unable to get a trail leading anywhere. At this point, Naruto decided to just go all out this one time and try to get some results. He made dozens of shadow clones, hanged them to have random appearances and spread them out all over town to get locations on where the man might have been. He usually wasn't this impetuous, but realized that the presence of a younger Chunin was making him slightly insecure. He remembered the boy from the academy graduation and wasn't too surprised to see that he was a Chunin as well. After a few hours of random searching for scent trails, one of his clones dispelled, alerting him to a strong concentration of the man's scent. Naruto immediately headed to where the clone had dispelled. As he looked around the place with his scent, Naruto was confused about the location he was in. Why would he be here of all places? Indeed, this was a graveyard, and yet, Naruto picked up his scent in differing concentrations all over the place. He checked a few of the tombstones and found that almost everyone here had been dead for over 50 years and there wasn't a single visitor in sight. In the end, he decided to leave a few clones in adjacent to the area and return to find Rado to report what he had found. -8. The team met again in a small briefing room of the police station. Rado began the meeting by filling them in on the important details he had gleaned from Itachi. So, after all that, I would have to agree with Itachi's assessment of the situation. There is an organized attempt to create civil unrest and destabilize the region. Azumo, Kotetsu, have you found anything out from the prisoner? Kotetsu shook his head while Azumo responded. No, I don't know who this guy is, but I suspect he's been trained to resist interrogation. That in itself tells us something and gives credit that you are correct in your conclusions. Rado nodded at this, unhappy that he had resisted interrogation and given more credence to their conclusion. Tsukumo, anything? Naruto blinked, trying one last time to think of why he would be there before responding. I was able to find a place that he has been spending a large amount of time. I have also determined that he has been there on at least 5 other occasions. Where? Rado asked, thankful for at least some kind of lead. Naruto sighed one last time. A graveyard. A graveyard. His team responded. Yes, and not just any graveyard. I didn't find any evidence that anyone had been buried in that particular graveyard in decades. Naruto responded. Rado looked thoughtful at that remark. It could be a meeting spot for anyone else he is working with. The entire team contemplated what he had said. All right, Kotetsu and Azumo will continue interrogating the spy. Itachi and I will go with Tsukumo to the graveyard to scout it out and start a watch. Rado directed his team. I have a couple clones there right now, doing that exact thing. Naruto informed his commander. Good. Rado responded, happy that it had already been started. -8. Rado scouted out the graveyard quickly, but carefully. He had seen that it was indeed an older graveyard, that had run out of room for newer occupants, but was still maintained by the city. It would be a pretty good meeting spot due to the absence of any people, but it would make an even better stash spot, which is why he was carefully looking for any disturbed ground. Assuming that Tsukumo was correct in his tracking, and Rado had no reason to think he wasn't, there was something about this spot that was important, and he was going to find out what that was. He could see Itachi had his Sharingan active and looking for discrepancies, so that was an asset for this mission. Eventually, Itachi waved them over to where he was standing. Rado and Naruto both looked around for anything out of the ordinary, but couldn't see anything. What's up? Rado asked after he couldn't see anything. Itachi replied with the same monotone voice, the ground has been disturbed through the usage of an earth jutsu here. Rado looked again and still couldn't see anything wrong, but trusted in the famed dojutsu. He then arrived at the more important question. Should we dig it up, or wait for someone else to dig it up? That indeed was the question. If they dug it up and yielded nothing, whoever might come along to retrieve it with an earth jutsu might flee when he noticed the package was gone. On the other hand, if they waited for someone to come along, they might miss out on an important clue. Can either of you two dig up the package without disturbing the earth? Rado asked the two young Chunin. Naruto looked at Itachi before responding. I could use my underground moving technique and drag it to someplace we don't mind disturbing. Rado turned to Itachi to see if he had a better idea, but he merely shook his head in the negative. They spread out to find a location that Tsukumo could bring up the package that would be out of sight. Eventually, they found a patch of earth between two bushes about 15 meters from the spot. Naruto took a deep breath before sinking into the earth and dragging the package horizontally, under the earth, zigzagging to avoid the buried dead. He had to surface a few times both for air and to make sure he was on course, but eventually he navigated to the correct spot. He surfaced with the package, slowly bringing it up, to disturb the earth as little as possible. Eventually, he brought up a small chest. The others gathered around as Rado opened it slowly, checking for internal tripwires. After finding none, he opened it up completely to inspect the contents. Inside were several papers and a few maps. The maps were of this region of Fire Country, a city map, and a couple of neighborhood maps of the city. The maps had several locations circled around them and movement plans on the street. The papers contained mostly plans and ideas for the instigation of riots and civil unrest. There was one other letter, however, that contained orders for the team on their mission. Your team is to make their way to the city of Toyozato and begin a disinformation campaign in order to create unrest in the region. Your mission is to take attention away from the northern borders of Fire Country as much as possible for the foreseeable future. Use your team to create disturbances within the government and major businesses while sowing discontent among the common class. Instigate riots and escalate matters wherever possible. Your goal is to see this spread across the entire region, so when completed in Toyozato, see to the spread of this goal at your discretion. The note was unsigned but had very distinctive penmanship. Upon reading this, Rado's eyes widened significantly, knowing this to be very important. Too important to rebury and use as bait. He double-checked the chest for anything else before closing it and handing it to his teammate. Tsukumo, bury this back where it was. Keep monitoring this graveyard from a distance and follow anyone that comes near. I'll work out a schedule to relieve you in a few hours. Naruto nodded back and proceeded accordingly. He hadn't read the note, but hadn't seen Rado quite so startled before. He sunk into the ground to begin putting the chest back in place. -8. When Naruto had been relieved 4 hours later by Itachi, he made his way back to the police station. When he arrived, he immediately headed to the briefing room where Rado allowed him to read the note. At first, it sounded pretty much like he had expected orders for this kind of mission to say. On his second look, however, he paid more attention to the second sentence of the note. Take attention away from the northern borders. This mission was a means to an end, making Konoha and the daimyo pay more attention to the south, so the northern borders will be more exposed. He looked at the maps and other papers before asking his commander what their next move would be. Rado answered seriously. The papers do show a lot of their plans and the local police are checking into them discreetly. Aside from that, we to have a plan for an upcoming riot, so we believe we can capture the leaders and the remainder of the team. Naruto nodded and yawned. Alright, do we have a place to sleep yet? I'd like to rest a little before my next shift, if that's alright. Go ahead. The police are letting us use one of their safe houses. Here is the address. Rado handed him a note of paper with the address written down. Naruto made to leave when Rado spoke once more. Tsukumo. Good work finding the graveyard. Things might have been very bad if you hadn't found it. Not just for this mission, but possibly for all of Fire Country. Rado said with a severity of seriousness that Naruto had seldom heard him speak with. -8. The next few days had proceeded roughly according to plan. They were able to slightly quell a lot of the misunderstandings that the agents had created, but could still tell that a riot might be imminent. They hadn't been able to catch any of the other agents, and so far watch over the graveyard had yielded nothing. Either the enemy agents were onto them, or they didn't need to access the contents of the chest. When police had announced the gathering of people near one of the industrial areas, Rado gathered the entire team together to prepare for a riot. The fact that it was occurring in a section of town where one of the maps had a large X only further cemented the idea. The team would be breaking into 3 groups. Tsukumo and Itachi, Azumo and Katetsu, and Rado with a police liaison. Each team was given duplicate orders and given a section to patrol. They were to identify and capture the instigators of the riot and stop it from escalating. As Naruto and Itachi were standing on the roof of a factory, overlooking the crowd, they both realized that this was the first time they were alone together. "You are the one who beat me in the taijutsu spar at the academy, aren't you?" Itachi said suddenly. Naruto looked over to the younger boy before nodding his head. "How old are you?" Naruto paused at the question before answering. 12. You. 11. Is taijutsu your specialty? Naruto considered the question, thinking that this supposition was due to the fact that it was a primarily taijutsu-oriented team and his victory over the boy in the exams. "No. In fact, I joined this team so that I could better develop my taijutsu, which was below average when I joined." Itachi looked even more confused at this. "Then how did you beat me in the academy?" "I watched you fight against the instructor previously, because I suspected they would pair the two of us up together, due to our similar ages. I noticed that your fighting style was a bit similar to mine in that we were both used to fighting against people bigger than us. I created a situation where it seemed you could take advantage of a weakness of mine, while actually revealing one of your own in the process." The Uchiha slightly glared at him before turning his attention back to the crowd. He made a motion to speak again when his attention was drawn to something else. "Wait. I see something." Naruto looked at his eyes to try and figure out where he was looking, but couldn't see anything. "What is it?" Itachi stared for half a minute before confirming. "Yes. There is a man with chakra in the crowd using genjutsu to egg on the people near him." Naruto looked at him strangely. "How do you know he's using genjutsu?" "The Sharingan can see chakra to a degree and is not fooled by genjutsu in the slightest." Itachi responded as if everyone knew that. But everyone did not know that. In fact, there was one person who definitely didn't know that. Naruto would have liked to keep focusing on this fact, but forced himself to keep his attention on the mission. "Where is he? What does he look like?" "He's at the edge of the northern side of the crowd. He's 6 feet tall, short black hair, wearing workers' coveralls." Naruto spotted the man Itachi was referring to. "All right. Keep your eyes on him. I'll circle around and try to catch him unaware." Naruto made a single shadow clone to stay with Itachi. "If he moves, tell my clone and it will dispel. I will get the message and respond accordingly. I will try to take him out with surprise. If it looks like I'm having trouble, feel free to assist." Naruto started backing away and making his way to circle the riot from the right. Itachi nodded and confirmed what Naruto had said, keeping his eyes glued to the target. After a few minutes, he saw another person with chakra walking toward the man. He turned to the clone and made to warn him of the second man. "There's a second man approaching. He has chakra as well and is weaving genjutsu of his own." The clone looked at the second man that Itachi had identified, but recognized it. "That's the boss. It's one of the forms he commonly takes." Once Itachi knew that he paid more attention to the genjutsu Tsukumo was weaving. It appeared that Tsukumo was using genjutsu not to hide himself, but to make himself more forgettable. He appeared to be just another face in the crowd, to be looked at briefly, but not examined. As he made his approach to the suspect, Itachi could see that the man had no idea what was coming. Tsukumo was behind him and about to make his move when his genjutsu changed. Itachi could see that he was making it seem like the crowd suddenly exploded with rage and screams, about to turn into a full-blown riot. The suspect was so confused by the unexpected change in the crowd that he didn't become aware of the stunning blow to the head. He was dazed for the next few seconds, too dazed that by the time he realized that he was in a sleeper hold, he was already blacking out. "Efficient," Itachi noted. The suspect was out like a light before he realized what was going on. And Tsukumo was already adjusting his genjutsu so that the crowd around him didn't notice him taking the man's unconscious body away. -8. A few hours later, the team was once more at the police station. The crowd had been dispersed before and had turned into a riot, and their team had captured 2 spies trying to instigate the riot. Rado had captured one of the instigators on his own and placed the man into a cell alongside his accomplice. When Naruto and Itachi returned with one of their own and the crowd had dispersed, they suspected they had succeeded in their mission. Itachi and the boiler team hung around for a few more days, trying to spot any signs of more civil unrest, but it seemed to be quiet. There was still a bit of grumbling from previous grievances, but without any additional ones, and with the old grievances being fixed one by one, the people were settling down. Unfortunately, when they were about to begin their interrogations the next day, they stumbled on a bit of a surprise. Each man was dead inside of their cell. An autopsy was performed and the preliminary cause of death was revealed to be cyanide poisoning. It was suspected that the men killed themselves due to the fact that they were captured and had failed in their mission. After the full autopsy was performed, doctors had discovered that each man had a portion of skin on a different place on each of their bodies that had been cut away. The doctor speculated that these were the hiding places they had hidden their cyanide suicide pills. Each of them had a small plastic bag containing a suicide pill hidden somewhere on their bodies, beneath the skin. It was a disturbing thought and screamed of competence. These were not simple terrorists or mercenaries, these were trained enemy agents. Either way, the mission was now completed for Itachi and the backup team. They were returning to Konoha with the evidence they had recovered from the chest and the bodies of the men. Konoha would perform a second and much deeper autopsy. They would discover anything that the civilians had missed. Naruto was deep in thought on the journey home. He had always thought that his genjutsus were one of his greatest strength. However, a deeper conversation with Itachi had altered that line of thinking. Itachi had been able to recognize every step of his genjutsu with his Sharingan and had informed him that someone with the Byakugan could do the same. He supposed he should feel grateful that the only two Justice in the world both belonged to clans of Konoha, who were therefore his allies, but he couldn't stop the feeling they were giving him. He felt a little cheated that some people could identify his illusions for being such with ease and couldn't help but fear that others could do the same. Naruto resolved himself to study and research how the Sharingan and other dojutsu were able to identify and read his genjutsu. How they were able to do all the things they could do, and how he could make genjutsus that would fool not just them, but everyone. -8. An elderly man made his way past the secret checkpoint of Anbu, only known to a few people. He walked a route he was well familiar with to reach his destination. He nodded at the secretary, who waved him in. A brief knock on the door announced that he was coming in as he made his way into the well-known office. Homura. The man sitting behind the desk stated, as if confirming his existence. Hiruzen, I've just become aware of a mission that turned up something important. Homura explained to the aging Hokage. What is it? Young Itachi Uchiha was on a C-rank solo mission to investigate rumors of civil unrest in the southern city of Toyozato. He stumbled on an active plot by foreign ninja to create civil unrest in the region and called for backup. Boiler Team 3 responded and was on site a day after receiving the notice. Once there, their team tracker discovered a stash site the foreign ninja were using and recovered some of their plans and a note written by their superior with their orders. The team used the plans to identify key areas and were able to capture 3 members of the team. Homura explained. Has the team interrogated the spies yet? The Hokage asked. They all had suicide pills hidden beneath their skin and took them after their attempt to create a riot failed. The team brought back their bodies. The Hokage nodded before asking, why bring this to my attention now? Homura pulled out a plastic bag containing the handwritten note. This is the note they recovered. The Hokage read the note, before becoming still when he recognized the handwriting. He gave the note back to Homura and motioned for him to leave. As Homura was leaving, he heard the Hokage say out loud to no one. Orochimaru, what are you up to? That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.